Pansophers Podcast, a podcast on Rosicrucianism, Hermeticism, and the teachings of the Western esoteric tradition, where adepts, practitioners, researchers share their views.
Hello, friends and listeners, and yes, welcome to a new venture of mine. This is Rudolf. You probably know me from the Pansophers Podcast, but this is episode 0, in fact, of the Pansophers Podcast. Well, maybe some of you, well, many of you even know Pansophers.com, this great website about the Rosicrucian tradition, and lately with the creator of that website, Sam Robinson, and with two other guys, and well, also a few more who are more in the background, we have decided that Pansophers.com will extend its broad approach to the Western tradition in general, with focus still on Rosicrucianism and on Hermeticism. But together we create a blog that will be wider than so far. There will be also a publishing possibility for some of you. There is also teaching that is going to be planned on this new Pansophers 2.0, as we tend to call it. And there is a podcast, and I have the pleasure and honor to be the creator of that new podcast. And I'm very happy about that because my colleagues there are so wonderful. So there is Sam Robinson, who I already mentioned, and who is the brain and the creator of all that. But there is also Ike Baker, who you probably know from the Arcanum podcast. He will be mostly working on blogging and teaching there on Pansophers. And there is
Ian Gladwin,
who you probably also know from his great blogging support on the Pansophers so far, from his artwork, and he will also be dealing with the publishing side of this new venture. So a great thing, and we thought before I start with the podcast itself, it would be great to introduce those guys, us, the four of us, to you, and to introduce to you our thoughts and the background and all that's going to happen on Pansophers.com from now on. And in October, so in 2 weeks from now, today is September the 29th, so in 2 weeks from now, on October 13, I will then launch with the regular episodes twice a month, every second and fourth Sunday each month, with the new Pansophers Podcast, where I do a bit in the style that you guys know and I think appreciate in the Pansophers Podcast, interviews with interesting people, practitioners, academics, writers from the field of the Western esoteric tradition, as I said, with a focus on Rosicrucianism, Hermeticism, Gnosis, etc. So this is an exciting new project also for me, and I'm very happy that we can do that together. Some of you might ask what's going to happen to the Pansophers Podcast. Well, it has been relaunched also 2 weeks ago. You probably saw that. And for the moment, I will publish this Pansophers Podcast not only on the Pansophers.com website and the related new podcast channel. It will in parallel also be published on the Pansophers channel. So you can listen to this on either of the channels online, and wherever you are, we're happy to have you there. But do, in any case, go on Pansophers.com. Have a look at this website if you don't know it yet. It's a great resource. It has a long tradition already for several years and has been really in the focus of many people who are interested in this field. So it would be great if you went there too as well. So once again, just to repeat, this is the Pansophers Podcast, twice a month, every second and fourth Sunday a month, and every third Sunday each month there will be Pansophers Podcast, and you will find both podcasts on my Pansophers channel, and there is, of course, the Pansophers website and the Pansophers channel everywhere on where you're used to get to your favorite podcasts. All those channels also will have a separate Pansophers Podcast channel. I hope that's clear. If you have any questions, if you have remarks, if you want to know anything about this, if you also would like to suggest anything, or if you have criticism, please write to me, write to info@pansophers.com. And if you want to go into the show notes, you will find that link and also the link to the website pages about the podcast there as well. So, well, great new venture. And as in thoughtservice.com, and that's a little bit my trademark, I believe, and I am certainly going to carry that on also here, I will going to play some music in this show again. And already you heard the nice intro that we have for the show, which will be played in full at the end of the show. That's also something we do on Thought Service. And another relation, this has also been composed especially by my friend Chris Roberts, who I'm really grateful for this. He did already the exciting Thought Hermes intro, outro music. And again, he has done it. Here he is with the Pansophers Podcast intro and outro music. I'm really happy for that. Thank you, Chris. This is great once again. My musical guest here today is Joshua Kirk. Joshua Kirk, he has already been on the Thought Hermes podcast, 2.5 years back in May 22. He has presented some of his compositions, and here he is back again with 3 new works, and it's a type of electronic music, very nice, very insightful, and of course related in its subject, and of course also by the way of composing it, by the occult background, by the work that Joshua does in that field. And well, let's dive in directly. The first title that we're going to hear is called Astral Unraveled. And, well, enjoy. Astral Unraveled by Joshua Kirk. Thank you for offering us this music for this show. We will hear more in the middle of the interview, as you guys from Thought Service are used to, and at the very end of the interview. But now let's dive into our subject here today, Pansophers 2.0, like I called this episode. That's not the official title of our project, but it's a kind of 2.0 because Pansophers 1, so to speak, has been around quite some time and has been visited by many, many people, more than 10,000 followers on Facebook. So that's something to say, right? So I won't keep you much longer. I told you in the intro already what it is all about. And we're going to meet now, well, from four corners of the world, you could almost say. Two guys were over in their American homelands where they live, Ike Baker and Ian Graham, and Sam Robinson, he is in the UK, and I am, as always, based near the Austrian capital, Vienna. So we spread across the Northern Hemisphere. And now we're going to join in the interview that's going to come now. Have fun.
Here comes the interview.
And so now I'm here in company of three gentlemen who will in the future, as I just said in the intro, be pansophers.com and all that it will be about. And I'm very happy to welcome here Sam Robinson, Ian Gladwin, and Ike Baker. And, well, probably many of you who are out there listening to this podcast today know at least those names and have read books by them, listened to podcasts by them, whatever. But today, we're going to introduce to you a project, a launch of some new paths for pansophers.com. We're coming to that in a moment. First of all, I think let's introduce ourselves. Well, I've already done that, but let's start with you, Sam. Sam Robinson, welcome here on the Pansophers Podcast. And please, who is Sam Robinson?
Who am I? I ask myself every day. Now, we have come together for this project. As the so-called leader of this, I've been the inspiration or creator of Pansophers. I've actually never seen it as my own thing. I've always tried to network with others, onboard others, let it be a platform for other voices. So that's part of who I am. I'm looking for that cooperation that is Pansophy, but at the same time, it's, just part of my character to, want to share in that path as well. So,
and your modesty is very honorable, but still you have written books, you have your background in magic, in the Golden Dawn, I believe, in many, many areas. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up in New Zealand Maori, Māori as we say in my language, and it's a very fortunate upbringing when it comes to the world of magic and folklore and mythology. We literally grew up with our gods. They're still alive, they're still with us, whereas in the West, we're having a revival. So I'm someone who has the Maori side, but also the Western side. So I'm, part of that Western revival, but I'm able to look at all of that through the lens of being a Maori. And it goes back, through not only through your bloodlines, but through your education. You're given so much as a child. You're told about the gods all the time. So when we grow up, it's just part of our lives. The gods are watching us, and when you're given stories from your old people, this is planting seeds, but it's also a blessing. You're being blessed while it's happening, so we don't, Western magic is different. We don't visualize our gods. We don't do that kind of stuff. Our gods are just with us. This is the life we live, and they're always watching, always judging. So are my ancestors. So I come from that old world, and that's very much shaped who I am and how I then went to practice Golden Dawn magic, Hermetic magic, that kind of stuff. I already had that lens, that enchantment of the world. So I was very young and went to an island in Australia. I was living in Australia at the time in the outback, and basically went and lived on an island for a year. It's called Mornington Island, where, again, a very fortunate situation. I was reading all the Golden Dawn books and Israel Regardie and putting everything I could into practice, kind of without knowing that that volume of practice is rarely achievable today. Now that I live in the real world like everybody else and not on an island, gosh, to do that level of magic again is not easy, So I was doing, the pentagram, hexagram, all that stuff every day, middle pillar every day. So probably an hour and a half every day of ritual work. Come Friday, supreme invoking, pentagrams. Saturday, at least a watchtower ritual. And a couple of times a month, a full-blown Z2 operation of the Golden Dawn, which, if people don't know what that is, it's a long-winded theurgical formula to bless something, to call the light and make something happen. So that was extensive. And there on that island, I also did my first attempt at the Abbot Mallet. And everything that I felt and experienced there has stayed with me for the rest of my life. It's almost like having a permanent consecration, and I try to share that with friends because sometimes people ask me, on the Rosicrucian path, should I do angel magic? Should I do this? And I often point out that, you can do angel magic, but don't look for that 10-minute wonder where you achieve something now and then it goes away. Jakob Burma is talking about this. Look for that permanent blessing, that permanent consecration, that permanent blessing where the angels remain with you. So I think that's pretty much shaped my view, and the rest is history. Long story short, I came to Germany with a partner and continued that Rosicrucian quest, looking, as we would say, for Rosicrucians, just like Falcon did. He went found Steiner, did the Rosicrucians exist? What really is in Germany, especially after the war? What remains? So I did some serious digging, and it was very rewarding finding what really is there. So all of that has basically shaped my journey. It's been really, really a great blessing all the way.
And now you live in the UK, I believe, right?
Back in England, yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, Sam. Exciting, and we'll hear more of that in a moment. Let's move over to Ian. Ian, glad we'll be going across the big ocean over to New York, where you live. And so you have been also quite at an early stage with Pansophers.com, I believe. But what's your background? Where do you come from? What's your magical and life background?
Yeah, so I've been with Pansophers for a while now, as you pointed out. Originally, I live in New York now. Originally, I come from Alaska. I was born and grew up there. My background, I've always had I would say a lifelong interest in mysteries. I came to practices of a magical nature later in life, not realizing later that I was always sort of interested in these subjects, but approaching them kind of in my own way. I grew up around nature, surrounded by, forests, rivers, and stuff like that. So I spent a long time growing up just surrounded by those things. My mother was a big influence on me. I always tell people I think that she was sort of a natural clairvoyant. She always spoke, she created an environment growing up where those types of things were just normal. And growing up in that environment, it wasn't really until I moved out of the state that I realized, other people look at things from a different point of view. In college, I studied things I gravitated to music first and then the arts. I spent some time exploring things, aesthetics and stuff like that. By the time I got into college, though, I had already, I began having an interest in things like Freemasonry. In fact, one of my first papers I wrote in college was about Freemasonry. I met a few people at the time, and I started getting interested in tarot and things like that. I continued pursuing art and things like that. And it wasn't until actually in my 30s when I started looking at some of this stuff a lot more seriously. It was a thing where it was I'm always speaking about it with friends, always interested in these subjects. It just came a time in my life where I really felt the push, the impetus to make these things real, into a practice. I have a background, in college. I studied things like philosophy, theology, and stuff. So it was I have a really, I'd say, well-seeked background in like the Western literary tradition, the philosophical tradition. But it seemed to me like the next step for me was to put things, take them out of the theoretical context and really, put them into a practical one. So I started off, like a lot of people, what was available for me were books on Golden Dawn. I spent 5 or 6 years cutting my teeth, on the self-initiatory path and Golden Dawn materials, Israel Ugadi's book and everything like that. And I pretty much worked in isolation for about 5 or 6 years before someone, I think, invited me online to something on Facebook. And I ended up stumbling across the Rosicrucian Tradition Facebook group, which Sam started a number of years ago. And after that, things kind of took a different path in my life. I started to study Rosicrucianism more directly. I was, in my Golden Dawn sort of studies, I gravitated towards Rosicrucianism early on. I stumbled across the secret symbols of the Rosicrucians book, and that really just like solidified things for me. I was like, I had no idea what was even going on in the book, but it was just like blowing my mind, and eventually I ended up joining some local groups where I'm at after a few years. And so that process for me of kind of like coming out, the shadows and, making things more real was a gradual process. And now I'm, I have to say I'm involved with a few groups here, and I have been for a number of years. My studies and my practice have taken me into German Rosicrucianism, particularly the Golden and Rosy Cross. That history has played a big part in my studies and practice. It's really, changed a number of things, how I view things, and in addition to that, I study a lot of. I still keep up with the philosophical side too. I have a very strong influence from the Greek tradition. Is really big for me also. So those two things combined, German Rosicrucianism. I am involved with some post-French groups where I'm at right now, but those things, as well as theological traditions coming from the Greek, have been pretty much where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Fascinating. Well, we are a really interesting bunch of people, I think. Here, Ike, you have joined, like me, I think I have to say, we have joined Pansophers.com, the new Pansophers.com, very recently. But of course, we also have a quite an extensive background in magic and in all of that. So where does Ike Baker's background come from? Where did it all start for you, Mike?
Well, I just want to clarify something. I won a raffle, so I'm very happy to be here. I hope that I hope I receive a Pansophers pin. No, I mean
we'll make one for you.
Please. I'm sort of a recovering New Yorker. Grew out of the ground there. My approach to this stuff was, I think, a little bit more along the lines of Ian's, where I sort of came at it obliquely, and there was a sort of gravitational pull that I remained unaware of until I was kind of already in its grasp. So I had studied stuff, right? I mean, what was available to me in the time and place that I was growing up and developing was a lot of Eastern stuff. So I studied with, a Zazen Roshi, and did all sorts of meditation and things like that. And really got into looking at some of the Vedic stuff, and particularly the thing that has really stuck with me from the Eastern tradition, because I received my training in Chinese medicine and acupuncture, is Taoism. I really enjoy esoteric Taoism. I find a lot of confluence. I feel like if you kind of immerse yourself and gain fluency to a certain degree in in those kinds of traditions, the alchemical, inner alchemical traditions, you can sort of transpose. You can sort of become a quote unquote priest of every temple at a certain point. You can see where the overlap is and not need to get too mired in the minutia. So after all the Eastern stuff, I began studying. When I was growing up, it was like a lot of Dan Brown stuff, a lot of, Henry Lincoln, Robert Lomas, Graham Hancock, sort of, I guess, quote unquote, erudition, or at least publication about things like Freemasonry, which just piqued my interest enough. I do also. I am attracted to the mysterious. And so I began studying that stuff, what was available to me. In college, I took a comparative religion. I really tried to empty every drawer in the chifforobe or dresser of comparative spirituality and things like this, comparative religion. And I did not find what I was looking for. Probably around 19 or 20 years old, though, I had an experience where my aunt had a tenant. And this tenant threw herself in front of a train. And she invited me over. She said, look, it turns out this lady was a hoarder. Very nice, but she was a hoarder. Could you come by and help me empty out some of this stuff? So I go over to the apartment, and it's just lined with books. Like literally, it's labyrinthine style. She had journals wrapped in the cellophane still from Barnes & Noble and things like that. But a book caught my eye. The cover of it was called The Oracle of Kabbalah by Richard Seidman. I still have it on my bookshelf. And I said, hey, this is a little weird, dead lady's property, but do you mind if I take this? And she said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I walked around my neighborhood the next day, and in like a day, I just devoured this thing. It's kind of a short book. Now, I can't say that I was any more educated after I read it than I was just before on the Kabbalah, but something struck me. I knew that this was important. So I went on the yellow pages or the white pages when people use that on the internet, and I typed in Long Island Kabbalah Group, and gentleman's information came up. I got in touch with him. I said, hey, I'd like to be a part of this. He said, well, that doesn't meet anymore, but there's this other thing. And the other thing ended up being the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And that's how I kind of found myself in a magical society once I found out about it, and I had been a member of the Theosophical Society, which was essentially just, they send you pamphlets and a magazine once a month or once a quarter. And so I wasn't really I didn't have the historical context fully to understand what the Golden Dawn was. So when these people told me they were practicing magic, ceremonial magic, I laughed. I thought they were doing some sort of Harry Potter wand waving, and I was a no call, no show to my first initiation. Total millennial flake. And, fast forward a couple of years later, and my life was in complete shambles, as they say, somewhat cliche, tower card experience. And I don't know why, but the first thing I did was reach back out to my contact at the Golden Dawn. And they were like, hey, yeah, I mean, this is what we do, right? We've got to give everybody a chance to come to the light. So I reinitiated, and the rest is history. I'm one of the temple chiefs. I'm the imperator of the Asheville, North Carolina temple. I'm based there in the States, and I kind of got pushed into talking and teaching about the Western esoteric traditions. For me, the practical stuff came first. I learned all about magic. I had the theurgic experiences. I went through the alchemical initiations. I learned elemental, celestial, divine magic, all that fun stuff. And then when I started peeking into the literature, I noticed how much I kind of intuitively understood because of the experiences that I had had. And I could see the sort of subterranean telos, the stuff that is not immediately apparent when you're just reading the stuff, but you just sort of see the harmony underneath everything. And so that's really it. I'm happy to be here with you guys. I host the Arcanum YouTube channel and podcast, and I just recently wrote a book called A Formless Fire, Rediscovering the Magical Traditions of the West, that came out about 2 months ago under Tria Prima Press.
Yeah, great book, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ike. Well, I need to briefly also introduce myself here because basically I'm not only the interviewer here today, but we have joined forces, the four of us, to create the new Pansophers, so to speak. But very briefly, I'm the European part originally. You are also in Europe, even if the UK doesn't really count for Europe anymore since a few years. But I'm the real European part, Central European part here, born in Switzerland and living in Austria and having lived in France for some years. But I'm definitely the oldest of you at age 64, so doesn't mean I have most experience in the practical side. So you guys have mostly more than me, but still, it's about 40 years that I started in shamanism. I went through anthroposophy for quite some time, never been a member of it, but studied a lot of Rudolf Steiner, who taught me a lot at the time. And I've always been a kind of a solitary practitioner since then. My background professionally is in music and theater, so probably ceremonial magic was something that attracted my attention from an early stage. So to speak, stage is the right word here. But in a way, it was the other way around. I realized maybe only 10 years ago that the talent that I found in myself, like playing games when I was 15, 18 years old and moved into music world, the opera world and theater world, probably had to do with what I'm doing now, with being a practitioner of ceremonial magic, and mostly still solitary because the area I live in around Vienna and the surroundings here are there's not much around, so to speak, here in that part of the world. So I built my own little group. Also, I have some Golden Dawn experience, but very briefly, because just for practical reasons, it wasn't really possible here. And having said that, and of course, Freemasonry is an important part of my life as well. I have over 30 years of practice in that, and I'm today, I think, in Austrian Freemasonry, one of those who they think is the weird guy because he's so esoteric, but I'm happy about that. So, just briefly, not more about me here. It's not about me, it's about us. And Sam, let's go back to you, and then we'll open that panel a bit wider. But Pansophers.com, we've spoken about it, and you should all go to it and see the blog and everything that you created there together with others. Yes, absolutely right. But still, you were the motor and the beginner of all that. I remember this great thing that you did on the different Rosicrucian orders, where you evaluated them in a way, in a very brilliant way. That's how I discovered Pansophers.com years ago. And I found that fascinating, and by far, I'm not the only one who discovered many, many things through you there and through other guys who, like Ian and others who were working with you on that. But now you wanted to go a step further, and that's why we have joined forces, right? So can you maybe briefly describe that step, and maybe then you two others, you tell a bit about your part and your role in that?
Absolutely. So just to recap where we are or where we've come from, Pansophers.com has been called the Rosicrucian Tradition website. And originally I did review all of the Rosicrucian orders. I created a kind of scoring system based on the manifestos and documents and so on. And it was a bit controversial. I mean, some orders take that quite personal, and as I tried to express, you are not your order. And it had a few purposes. And those reviews primarily were actually about bringing people together and dissolving our boundaries. Because, not long ago, some orders, you call them almost sectarian, we are this and they are that, and we are against each other. And, if you join that order, maybe you're not allowed in that one, which is silly, because it all goes back to this thing from the 1600s. And then the question is, do they really represent the Rosicrucian tradition? And if so, how much? Okay, so we put them under the spotlight a bit, have a look at what they're really teaching. And there's certain things in a lot of those orders, because a lot of them were created in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And, they sort of raced to proclaim themselves, we are the true Rosicrucians. we have some secret chiefs or invisible guides who have made us, we are the chosen ones. I shall take Rosicrucianism to America, said Lewis. No, it's me, said Heindel. And so the story goes on. All of them claiming to be this special thing, sometimes with substance, sometimes without, more or less. You have to have a look at it. And ultimately, I wanted to bring people together to talk about universal Rosicrucianism. And at that time, a lot of people hadn't heard of Pansophy. And one of the greatest things I enjoy, like I said, it's about bringing people together in reality, creating the dialogue. One of the greatest things I enjoy is when adepts who have been studying this stuff for years actually come and say, you know what, I actually learned something from that too, that helped me. So I love that. It's totally rewarding. And we onboard a lot of authors. It's a platform for anyone interested in Rosicrucianism to have their say, to publish something, So I don't even see it as my site. I see it as a living community for us all. So, and I spotted Ian's content one day, and I thought, oh, this guy can really write. I've got to get him over here. Hey, man, here's a site. Would you like to blog with us? It was a bit like that with a lot of people, but I really stuck, and it became our mission to share this. And when people realize Pansophy is different, and we had a few other things that maybe nobody else had, such as, we could point out some other Rosicrucian practices nobody had heard of. Everyone's heard of the Golden Dawn and Crowley and Martinism, but now we're coming through with Koenig, Mailander, what the Germans did. It's very rare, hardly understood even in Germany. So we're able to give that a voice for the first time in English. And that's really attracted people because we're starting to talk about how actually all of these old Rosicrucian groups did it. Falcon's Golden Dawn did it, the OTO did it, so many other groups. The list goes on. So with that in mind, we're sharing Pansophy, a universal vision of Rosicrucianism, and these techniques, Koenig techniques, and the fact that Mailander existed and there was a kind of guide behind the Theosophists teaching Rosicrucians. That's very interesting history. So from there, we have built a voice for Rosicrucianism, but I really feel strongly that now the site has to be not just about the Rosicrucian tradition, but now we're going to go into the Hermetic traditions, and that's where I, in particular, caught my eye, and I know that Ian's very interested in this stuff, so I got us all together, and that's why we're announcing next, the reviews of the Hermetic orders. So we've done our Rosicrucian reviews. What happens when we look at, the Hermetica of the Hermetic orders? So I'll just jump back here and let Ike and Ian have their say there, because actually that's going to be their project to give that a voice and be their mission to express.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be, again, I'm sure, controversial, and that's good. Controversy is a good thing, otherwise we have no discussion. Okay, as long as it doesn't separate but combine, then it's a good thing. So, of course, Hermeticism, and that's also my cheval de bataille, as the French say at the moment. But Ian, what's your role in the Pansophers 2.0 to take a modern word for what we are going to do with the next step here?
One of the things that's been really interesting about Pansophers and the Rosicrucian tradition since I've been involved in it is just seeing that. One of the things that really attracted me to Sam's, introduction of these projects to begin with was how comprehensive he wanted to make them be. Which is to say, on one hand, that means it's inclusive of different groups and different perspectives. But on the other hand, about revealing things about the tradition, these various traditions that people may not be aware of. And one of the things that's always fascinating is that, the more individuals who get involved, each person tends to bring their own unique perspective. I think Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism are two different, they're currents, and you get attracted to these currents and they draw you in certain directions. And when that happens, you might end up going down paths that you didn't expect, and you uncover figures, histories, practices that, other people may not be tuned into it or keyed into at that moment. So one of the things that I'm really looking forward to with this new launch of Pansophers is we are going to be we have a publishing arm, Pansophers Press. Sam and I have already released a couple of books on that already. Sam with his Mylander book, me with my J.B. Kearney book, Letters on the Royal Art. And what that's going to be is basically a way to get authors who are interested in subjects such as Rosicrucianism, Hermeticism, so on, to put out their materials. It's going to be unique in the sense that it's kind of like a union of self-publishers. So really the way that we're looking at it is helping people self-publish their materials, but to use our networks, to use the platform as a way to get their work out there. Because that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, even for traditional publishing houses, is just to find the right audience. And, our thinking was, if we have this audience, we have this platform, we get the authors, here you go. The benefit for that is it benefits everybody, because various authors on the same label end up bringing attention to each other's works. So we're hoping that, the bundle is stronger as a whole rather than, the sticks as they're separate, being like easily snapped, as that sort of analogy goes. But that's one area that I'm keyed into right now, particularly with this new relaunch. And I have other books coming out. My long-awaited book on the Golden Rosenkreutzer, I'm finally getting near completion sometime soon. That should be coming out. And, we'll continue to be doing, talks like this and blog posts relevant to those subjects. So there's going to be a lot more to come.
I think it's a fascinating idea to be kind of, as you said, kind of a platform for self-publishers, but to do it together. And of course, that means we are four here today talking about this, and it's the four main areas that we cover here. And of course, you have to kind of limit the number of those people who lead to the stuff. But of course, Pansophers is not 4 people. It's many, many more people who are with us, who are on the blog, will be publishing, who do other things here. And one of the areas that also, and that is for Pansophers now completely new, is also the teaching area. And Ike, probably you are the right person also to talk about that, because you're going to take some kind of lead in that, and you know a lot about it by your own personal experience already.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I was very happy when Sam first approached me, and I still am, because as I found out that we four, specifically me and you guys, we're going to be working more closely. That was extremely attractive to me. I'm very excited about it, because teaching is definitely probably where I feel myself most at home. I feel like I give the most value out of the several sort of stations that I occupy my time with, and I came up in teaching this stuff through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So it's all started really there, teaching the historical context, the philosophical context, and the theoretical context behind a lot of what it is that we do. And that certainly, you begin sort of opening those corridors and investigating those things. And as Sam says, that moment of realization that there is something beyond your order. You are not your order. And this goes far back. It challenges a lot of the basic assumptions that we have about what we're doing. That's something that's extremely interesting to me. I put out a 2-part series on Hermeticism and Hermetism, really, on the Arcanum channel, and that did pretty well. I like to facilitate a discussion, because the first thing I think that we have to try and pin down, if we're going to, sit there and start evaluating these things, is what is Hermetic? How do you define that? Now, it's likely that the 4 of us have a different view on what a lot
Probably
of that is.
8 different views on the Pansophers.
Yeah, exactly. So that again, I am drawn to that kind of challenge, but I'm really looking forward to the collaboration that comes behind that. And my background also is very much in the I would say Neoplatonic and associated currents of ceremonial magic, and also philosophy as something practical, right? The philosophical discourse, the philosophical investigation that actually has an effect on the sort of internal person, right? I guess in the classical sense that we refer to the word psyche, the internal processes and that selfhood and how that is changed by philosophy. And we find a lot of confluence between the two. For instance, a lot of the Hermetic texts take the form of those dialogues, the teacher and student, or divine being and priest, or a father and son, parent and child sort of discourse back and forth. So to me, especially knowing that there's really not anything in the Hermetica that predates the Platonic dialogues, because it was specifically the synthesis of the Greco-Egyptian traditions that came out of as a result of the Alexandrian conquests and the ensuing Hellenism, Hellenized Egypt. It's very interesting for me to see that they end up having this unified vernacular. They use the same terms to describe these discrete phenomena, and even in something like the use of Coptic. I think out of 26 of the 22 of the 26 maybe letters of the Coptic alphabet are Greek. So obviously we're coming out of hieratic and demotic and trying to find this common language in order to bridge the gap of communication between the Greeks or the Hellenics and the Egyptians philosophically, so that they can begin to sort of because that's what the Greeks did. The Greeks, they were a culture of synthesis. They took on all sorts of things. They saw a lot of commonality, and so we end up with something like Hermes Trismegistus. And this kind of this commonality between Hermes and Thoth that they saw, and gave us such a beautiful, rich tradition. So I'm very interested in exploring that as a starting point for how we investigate these things. And then, a lot of this stuff is going to be a reconstruction. Yeah, all of it is going to be a reconstruction. Everything is reconstruction. I consider myself a scholar. I adhere to the most amount of, the protocols of academic erudition, but I don't let that fetter me based on my own experiences. And I'm not certain that older always means better. So there's a lot of interesting ways that you can look at this stuff, right? Because they are, at the end of the day, living traditions. They have to evolve with us. They have to change with us. But, if it changes completely beyond recognition, well, then it might be something different. There might be an innovation. So I'm very interested in seeing the areas of confluence, like and for instance, there are certain theurgic and hermetic aspects of ritual, like we could look at the theophagia, the eating of the god or something like that, and how that's there. It's not likely that there is a one-to-one translation, but something like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn has that in its mystic repast, where they eat the Osirified elements of on the altar of Osiris Onofris and things like that. There's a lot of that. You have to be able to find the baseline, find the basic protocols that they describe, and then see how it was transposed, see how it was evolved. So I'm very much looking forward to things like that, and especially even like theomorphia, right? The changing into the God and the Golden Dawn's use of God forms, things like that. Isadora Forrest has done tremendous research on that in, and looking at certain of the pyramid texts and things like that. Taking on the cloak of the great lady Isis or Nephthys and sort of invoking and becoming this being. So, we have a method of doing that is modern. I'm very interested to see in other traditions where that happens, because I happen to know the Golden Dawn very intimately.
So you are just proving us by what you just said, Ike, that you are going to be a great teacher also on that system here, and have a lot of many things to add to that group here. Well, if I may say briefly what I'm doing here, beyond being fascinated that we can all do this together and have many things to do. Well, I have run the Pansophers Podcast for 7 years, and I probably have read a bit too much of Rudolf Steiner, because always after 7 years in creative work, I need to replenish a little bit because the septenary has passed. And, I needed some new inspiration. And Sam and I were talking about that, and he told me about his project on the Pansophers, and I thought, And so here I am, and we'll be running twice a month, every first and third Sunday of the month, a new episode of the Pansophers Podcast. And the second Sunday of the month will be still reserved to Thoth Hermes, but that's going to be in a bit on a particular way over the next few months. And here I'm going to talk about the subjects we were just discussing, talk with you guys, talk with people, with guests that I will invite, and we will talk about that from very different areas, not only people who work with and on the Pansophers, but to stay, as it was just said by Ike, in that field of synthesis and bring things together. But in the end, it's Pansophy, and as the word says, it is something that unites a lot, and I think that's really our background. I'll come back to that in a moment. We take a little musical break, as people are used from the Pansophers Podcast. I will do that here as well on the Pansophers Podcast. So let's take a musical break, and we'll come back in just a few moments. So this is the right moment, as just said, to present some music to you again by Joshua Kirk, who is our musical guest here today. And now, as the second piece, we are going to hear, you immediately recognize the relation to the occult. The second piece is called Owl of Saturn. Owl of Saturn, a lovely piece, I believe. And after the interview at the very end, you're also used to that from Thoth Hermes. Right away, we're going to hear our third piece of music here today, which is called Long After. But I'd really urge you to do two things. A, go to the website to see the show notes, to see mostly also about the music here today. And once the interview is over, stay on for the outro. I will announce next episodes, or first episodes, so to say, guest here, and listen to the outro music as well, the full one, because of course the intro is only 1 minute long. We cut it a bit shorter, but the outro is really 5 or 6 minutes long, and it's really great music. So give it to yourself, listen to it, and let's all thank again Chris Roberts. But now it's Joshua Kirk and Owl of Saturn. Okay, here we are again. And I just mentioned before the break Pansophy. And it was, of course, said that word was used quite a bit already in our discussion here. I wondered, what actually do you all mean by exactly that term? Because when I speak to people, not the group here, but what's Pansophy? Oh, there was that group in Germany in the early 20th century, and no idea what it is. Oh, isn't that an old Greek thing? Well, Sam, you start. What is it? What is Pansophy for you? I mean, can be different things probably for anyone.
You're right. I mean, there was a guy called Trenker in Germany, and he tried to understand universal Rosicrucianism and gather together, all the documents. And one thing that was clear, that he tried to secure this traditional form of Rosicrucianism in his time. And he didn't succeed because he lacked, the practices. Along came Aleister Crowley with, all his set in stone system, and the Germans were very attracted to that. But something of Trenker remained, and Ian pointed out a few books and things that Trenker was bringing together, calling Pansophy and putting under that umbrella. But actually, there's a whole bunch of names we could mention, but Krause is one that Ian really brought to the surface for our Pansophy. And Krause was basically, talking about panentheism rather than pantheism. Pantheism, okay, God, nature. Panentheism, God expressed in nature, but still God transcending nature. So all in all, and that's a big part of it. But there are philosophical aspects to it, and I guess Ian can identify a few things, even to the early days of Pansophy in a second. But for me, in our modern times, that universalism that they were looking at, because they were trying to look at, humanity as a whole. How can we make this perfect society, these utopian visions we have? And they said, education's one thing. And they were looking at sacred diagrams, sort of talismanic cities, all this kind of stuff. And that became a living spirit. And I call that the kind of German mission, because after that time in the 1600s, so many German philosophers were, staking their claim in that great argument, all trying to figure it out. You go through the German philosophers such as Goethe and Kant and Fichte and all these guys, they're all kind of debating about it. It just had a knock-on effect. So that's all happening in Germany. But for me, I boil it down to cooperation. That's what we're doing now. And that's what we've been doing on Pansophers for a long time, helping authors come together, helping different people from different orders understand this universal tradition, bringing people together. And even when there's differences, we find a way. And it gets funny sometimes, because a typical discussion that comes up in Rosicrucian tradition is some Rosicrucian orders believe Christian Rosenkreuz is a real person, a historical real person. Others believe he was an allegorical figure. The people into the historical Christian Rosenkreuz, well, some of them go so far, if they follow Steiner claimed that CRC would rescue some people, and call you to the Rosicrucian message to be a teacher for him. They see academics as non-spiritual, who haven't been called by CRC. The others who believe in the allegorical side actually are also Rosicrucians. I mean, the manifesto writers were spiritual academics themselves. So Pansophy has that side, no doubt about it. So there is this middle ground where we try and create that dialogue between both parties who normally wouldn't see eye to eye or even dismiss each other. So ultimately, I boil down the message of Pansophy down to cooperation between our little circle and all society.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's somebody, maybe you guys, you have certainly heard about the book or read the book. And well, Bob Gordon, he's somebody who has also published a lot on this website and will probably also be around at some point here again. He published that little book called The 21st Century Rosicrucianism, which I found fascinating in many aspects, because it's talking a lot about what you Sam just mentioned. How do you, Ian, Ike, how do you see that? How is Rosicrucianism, but also beyond that Pansophy, which is more than don't want to reduce Rosicrucianism, but it's more than just Rosicrucianism. It's a little bit more, right? That what you just said, Sam. How do you see it in the 21st century? How do you see it go ahead?
Pansophy has, it's in one way it's a difficult term to like define, which is why I like it. I think like Rosicrucianism, it's a word that when you approach it, it means something, but you're not really sure exactly what it means. You have to spend a little bit of time with it, and everyone has their own sort of version of what the symbols of the rose and cross mean, and what Rosicrucianism is, etc. From my point of view, and this is based on whatever scholarly research plus whatever personal experiences I derive out of my own practice, relationship to that stuff. Pansophy is on one hand a tradition. It's a philosophical tradition. It's a magical tradition. It's a spiritual tradition. We might even say theosophical. If we wanted to boil it down, sometimes the way I like to think of it is like if you took the folk influences of Paracelsus, the natural celestial and super celestial worlds of Agrippa, and then put in Jakob Böhme his theosophy, you would kind of have all the ingredients for like kind of what we're looking at, plus a little bit of Andrea's utopianism, because I think Pansophy also has at its heart, this is the way that I view it, is a reflection of Renaissance humanism. That spirit of sort of preserving, let's say, the idea of the divine not being just transcendent, not being just found, through the influence of the planets and to the effects of nature, but also held within society, within the human world, and that within that system, it's something we can strive towards. This is where I think things like Eric Poikert's work, him being a folklorist, becomes important, because it's not just that he's interested in the stories of, we might think of as the spirits of nature and stuff like that. It's that these are things that are important to people and communities that I think is a really important part of Pansophy. So, we could say that Pansophy, in a way, at least the way I'm seeing it or thinking about it, is related to, the whole cosmos, all the way from the top and beyond to the lowest reaches of the earth, which is a little bit ambiguous. And it maybe seem like too ambitious, but I think once you break it down into these different categories, there's a Pansophy of the natural world. There's a Pansophy of the human world. There's a Pansophy of magic, and there's a Pansophy of theology and theosophy. I think of it as more as like a way to approach things, not to be exclusive of what it means to be a spiritual, philosophical being today. And in another way, it's kind of a way to try to kickstart an approach or way of living, very much similar to like the ancient Alexandrian world, where people were sharing stuff. Ike was talking about the Greek synthesis. That doesn't happen unless people are open to other cultures, seeing relationships with them and allowing those influences to reverberate with one another. And this is why I think it's related to Rosicrucianism, but it's a little bit more, like you were saying, Rudolf, in the sense that it is universal in that sense, but it's an approach in a way of trying to just kind of be more open and universalize our approach to spirituality and philosophy and everything else.
Well, I think even already through the fact, which was not on purpose, we didn't do that on purpose, but as it happened, and we saw that in the first round that we did here when everybody introduced themselves, there is a tradition from New Zealand that's part of this group. There's a tradition from Alaska, a tradition from the central United States, from Europe. So, and we didn't do that on purpose. And still, we met around, and we're meeting around the same topic. So, Rosicrucianism is a really European, German origin, but it has developed in a completely different way and gone across all cultures, I would say. And if I get you right and how I understand it, that's also what we want to carry beyond any tradition linked to one certain type of culture. You can't be universal all the time, but of course traditions are rooted in something, and I very strongly believe in the roots of traditions. That's why they're called traditions when you go to the root of the word itself. But still, it is not something like some people might have it that Rosicrucianism is Christian. It isn't, right? It is more than that, right? And I think we can show that. We want to probably show that. Ike, where do you see the future of that kind of movements and our future of our work and what it can bring to people?
Well, I tend to look at it as, and maybe this is a bit Rosicrucian, but I tend to look at it as the spirit, the telos of it, the underlying animating force of these traditions that we, for lack of a better term, called esoteric or spiritual or occult, or they spring forth from a common source. I truly believe that. I think to say that they're all the same thing, the way they manifest, right? You can't be universal all the time. That's extremely reductive. So I agree with you. You can't be universal all the time. But what I find in the historical research is that, Rosicrucianism seems to appear out of a couple of different things. And one of those things for me is Hermeticism, right? Because it all kind of happens around the same time. You've got the sort of reintroduction of these Hermetic texts, these Neoplatonic and Platonic texts with Ficino, but more importantly, really, or at least not to be neglected, the works of Ludovico Lazzarelli and his complete translation of the Corpus Hermeticum, whereas Ficino abandoned the work because he was unimpressed. Lazzarelli then adopting it into his as a holistic sort of incorporation and understanding it, exemplifying to the profundity of his understanding of these ancient Hermetic texts in something like the Crater Hermetis. He understood it through the lens of his, I guess, maybe what we would call mystical or esoteric Christianity, right? He's the first person on record that we have to say, I am a Hermeticist and a Christian. And I find that synthesis, that carrying through of these things, you have Trithemius there then who trains up Agrippa, and as well as Paracelsus. This is all happening at the same time. You have the Arbitel. I think that's 1575, a new type of grimoire, a new type of ceremonial magic that's reaching back to the Greek Olympian spirits and being heavily influenced by Hermetic philosophy. Really, very influenced by Paracelsian alchemy. Alchemy being predicated on Hermetic philosophy. Alchemy can't really exist without the underlying superstructure of Hermetic philosophy in a lot of ways. So I see it as Rosicrucianism being a kind of pulling forth or bringing forward into that day and age this Pansophy, this universal wisdom, and it happening under the auspices and the garb of the Rosicrucian movement. I also find, that sort of confluence and that harmony it's very much happening today. These things are, we're involved in communities. We're involved in magical practice. We're involved in the reconstruction and rediscovery of these traditions in a way that can help us through what's going on in the modern day and serve the modern paradigm. And some of that has to be us being very observant, very aware, and very diligent in noticing and pointing out where we're approaching these things with an unconscious materialist or postmodern or positivistic bias, right? Because we do have to meet this stuff on its own terms to successfully interpret it. But I would say that it's just a continuation. The Pansophy is both, I think. I think it's like Ian says, it is a way of approaching the world. It is a way of approaching the information, but it is also, I think it is the actual taking of the work and using it and moving it forward, bringing it forward the way the Rosicrucians did to the Hermetic stuff, the way, even Paracelsus did, right? Taking alchemy, which was the transmutation of metals, and saying, well, now we're going to do spagyria. Instead of enriching ourselves, why don't we make medicines for people and serving his time, his day and age? Even Agrippa looking at what he considered at his time to be a folk tradition of superstition, right? What does he say? He says, I confess that magic teaches many superfluous things and curious prodigies for ostentation. Leave these as empty things, but do not ignore their causes. I think that's the best way of, for me, finding the Pansophy, these underlying causes, these objective yet occult, right, sort of hidden or latent things that we can get in touch with by way of reconnecting with the ancient stuff or the older stuff and bringing it into the modern day. So I think it's both the way that we look at stuff, but it's also the way we use the stuff. It's the way it becomes, we make it actionable in the present day. Otherwise, it's just kind of information. I feel like Sophia is wisdom, which is knowledge applied.
Well, thank you, Ike. It was great things you said there. So this is a restart, and of course, a restart also not only have the interior meanings, but also a new image, a new exterior meaning somehow. And those two are, of course, linked. Also, the logo, which we use now for all those doings we are planning, and has been redesigned. Ian, can you tell us a bit about that logo and also its background, what it means, and how you see it?
Yeah, definitely. So sort of like piggybacking off of what Ike was saying, about having something, practical come out of this, not just, a theoretical exposition. We thought about redesigning the symbol for Pansophy. Of course, it has influences coming from Rosicrucianism. There's the rose, which people will see. Sometime within, I don't know how many years it was, I started to become really fixated, you could say, spiritually on the idea of Sophia, who is a very important figure within the tradition of Rosicrucianism. Jakob Böhme obviously speaks a lot about Sophia, divine wisdom. There's divine wisdom within biblical texts. There's, the wisdom of Athena associated with Greek myth. But I was quite impressed by this idea of Hecate being related to Sophia for many reasons. So behind Pansophy is this idea, Pansophy on one hand means universal wisdom, but I started to see at some point Pansophia being also related to a universal Sophia, to put it in those terms. So Hecate is known as a goddess who is associated in some traditions with the world soul, such as in the Chaldean oracles. Others describe her as being, governing the three realms. As like she has three phases, the heavens, the seas, and the earth. And to me, it's very much in line with the Rosicrucian idea of Sophia, because the Sophia's there is not necessarily just about, in some traditions you have Sophia who fell, and it's like this, she wanted to know the ineffable, and so she descends into matter, and the material world is created, etc. She's sort of more embodied of an embodiment of a totality of the cosmos, the world soul, mother of nature, mother of souls, that type of symbolism. And so I thought the wheel of Hecate would be a nice way to combine these ideas with the rose, and to steer it to the direction more of a Pansophia, in the sense of like a kind of a universal Sophia being present at these different stages, I guess you could say, or realms of reality. And within that, there are some subtle things that I hope people look at and pick up on, such as, Hecate is considered the goddess of the crossroads. Well, we don't have a cross present in the symbol of the wheel and the rose, but the way that the paths wind around, if you follow that wheel, there is a crossroads that appears, So if we think of the cross esoterically being, for example, being, the vertical joining the heavens and the earth, and the horizontal being the, the plane of humanity, for example, there's similarly some symbolism tied into this symbol of Pansophy that we're combining and putting forward, in a way to suggest how these different realms, as we could say, of reality, natural, celestial, spiritual, mystical, if we want to go into the ineffable realms, how these things are connected. So in terms of, what to do with all this, I definitely think that we're all on the same page in terms of our understanding and us coming together. I think what I've heard from the three others of us, including myself, is this interest and a sort of acknowledgement of a need to make something like this happen, like a need to put this thing forward as a living thing, a living tradition. I think many of us have a lot of respect for scholarly pursuits, and I think we have to keep that. If we are going to address traditions, we have, as Ike said, we have to know what we're talking about. We can't just fabricate things, thin air. It doesn't really do anybody any good. But in addition to that, that we really want to add something, to the world that we can move forward with as like a living tradition.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thank you. Well, those of you who are listening and who now ask themselves, what's that logo looking like? So, well, if you're not on YouTube, you're not going to see it now because, of course, this is an audio podcast. But if you went, for example, on Pansophers website, that would be a good idea, because also the Pansophers website has developed quite a bit since you probably last saw it, because that's also part of this new steps we are taking. Talking about which, what are our next steps? What's our kind of plan for the next couple of months? Because we have now launched this here because we are ready to go. But of course, this is still under construction, under building up. So, for example, Ike, when do you think that teaching will be starting? What do you have any time schedule already for that, or any ideas what the first topics might be?
Yeah, well, Sam and I have talked about a few different ways to get started. It's looking like for me, in terms of schedule-wise, it'll probably be after, probably be in the new year, because there's a lot going on. We've got next month in October we were calling it the New Hermopolis Conference, but now it's the Hermopolis Symposium, and Ian actually is one of the digital presenters for that, which I'm super stoked about. So that is going to take up a significant portion of my month, and then after that, we'll kind of regroup. One of the things that I'm really interested in that Sam and I talked about is it's kind of been under the radar, but I don't want to take away from the launch I just did, but I've got another book coming out with Llewellyn in April of next year that has to do with a Western-based sort of internal alchemy, using the symbolism and vernacular of alchemy, as well as the Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic tree of life, and things like that. I think that's going to fit in really well with some of the the Mailander stuff, and quite a bit of the German Rosicrucian inner alchemy stuff that Sam has shared with me. And we're going to continue to sort of unfold that. I'd like to put a class together for that, for the book, to coincide with the book, so that the book is sort of a text for that class. And I'd like to put that together probably sometime in the new year. I'm really excited also that I think it'll be Ian and I working hand in hand to do the Hermetic reviews, find out just how Hermetic all of these things are. And
so just to repeat it, that's the reviews in a bit the similar way that the Rosicrucian reviews happened already in Pansophers 1.0. So
yes,
you doing that together for the Hermetic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we might be able to turn something like that into a little bit of class, into a class on Hermetism and Hermeticism and stuff like that. So I would probably say maybe in the new year. It's definitely something that we're working out now. We've got a lot of logistical stuff coming through. But I am chomping at the bit. Everything has to happen in its right time, but I'm ready to go.
Great.
Yeah.
That sounds good. And I think, Sam, we're also mentioning Mailander for several times now while we're talking. I think there's also some plans on your end from that end, and want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So I really like what Ike's talking about, this direction to head towards inner alchemy, because it's quite clear there's a need or a demand for it, and there are some kind of Hermetic Masonic orders that have their own internal alchemies, but you get the impression that no one's really nailed it yet. So I started looking in Germany. What did they do? And a lot of people go to the East in the finish. They give up on Western alchemy because they see all the complex language, the terminologies for the states of consciousness and the different levels of awakening, and the internal bodily structures. The East appears to have it all. And that's part of our message. That's not necessarily. I mean, maybe you can adapt some Eastern things, but the West does have its own tradition, and these orders had it. Especially in Germany. Along came Aleister Crowley. A lot of that got drowned out, but not completely. So we're resurrecting that. And what I'm going to be doing is going to fit very nicely with what Ike's doing. So Mailander, as I said, for those who don't know, he was a hidden guide behind the Theosophical Society. Many of the Theosophists left Blavatsky and made him their new teacher. They said, well, these masters Blavatsky has, they're out of our reach, and we don't even know if they're real. Here's our Rosicrucian invisible master. And he didn't want to be known. He was just a nearly illiterate man who had some special gifts, and they called him John, after John the Evangelist, and he gave them all spiritual names, and he tried to bring them to regeneration. And some of the Theosophists left some wisdom, but he was teaching the Koenig tradition, which is something from the 1800s, an internal alchemy even from that time. And we're able to show that actually some of Koenig's own living students, a good example is Leinigen von Billigheim actually Koenig's own disciples joined Meilander's circle. So Meilander inherited things from Koenig directly. Meilander's own disciples continued, and like Meyrink, and their living students continued, and they were even writing books, up to the 1950s, and their students have continued. So we can show actually a series of books, these guys quietly carrying on. When I told them, that there's such a big interest in Western alchemy, they were very touched, because they said to me in Germany, we had hopes that one day somebody would be interested, because it's on the verge of dying. And it's astounding, because it's such a beautiful, rich heritage of oral traditions and practices, and we're bringing that now. So it's a bodily practice of bodily awakening, of regeneration, and a lot of Christian aspects factor into it, but some Germans went away from that, and they started, looking at other bodily energies, the procreative energies, for example, for regeneration and so forth. The OTO, we're looking at it, as I said. So my book's going to present a total of 16 different Koenig versions from 16 different groups, and that is a large book. It's about probably 700 pages. And I'm hoping to, really kickstart a widespread interest and revival in this tradition as well. So we're going to bring that out also early next year, by the looks of it. And hopefully, we can do some lectures on that. I know Ike will be able to do some things. Ian's, done his Koenig book. He's able to talk about the Masonic internal mysticism. So it's a joint effort to reawaken this tradition again. And I envision that, one day it'll be equally as important, or have a, strong standing in people's mind, just as Martinism does or Golden Dawn does. I want people to realize that this is, something solid and old and a Western heritage that people can embrace.
Great. So definitely when this will be ready to be published, this will also be part of one of the episodes here on this podcast. But just to make it clear also, the Pansophers Podcast is not going to talk only about the 4 of us or the 10 of us who are doing this, but it's Pansophic also in its sense that we are going to talk to different people, different currents within that range that we were mentioning. So to stay open, to stay as universal as tradition allows. And I hope we succeed in all that, but I'm quite sure we will. You, Ian, mentioned earlier that the publishing side, right, that we are opening or offering a platform for self-publishing, etc. So I guess you will get about 20 emails right away, 5 minutes after this show. What would you suggest to those people who want to write to you? Does it make sense? Or what's needed? I mean, what do you expect from that?
Well, yeah. Right. So that having been said, I mean, we're definitely looking for a few things, a few important things I would set down first, which is to say, we're definitely interested in putting out, number one, works that address the subject clearly, Rosicrucianism and its affiliated practices, philosophies, worldviews, magic, mysticism. We're a little bit, I would say, focused on the obviously spiritual development side of this work, but we're open to that. We are also interested in work that does have a good scholarly rigor. We don't necessarily want, it doesn't do good for the brand, doesn't do good for everyone involved if we don't keep up a strong emphasis on that. But we're offering, I should say a few things about what we would offer for authors to make it appealing. Why get involved with what we're doing rather than just go out and do it yourself. We do have access in-house to things such as typesetting softwares. We do have ways that we could show you how to format things, point directions to good editors, keeping things costs down for authors and things like that. And we're not asking for a tremendous amount for the help in this. We really just want to see good quality works be put out, and we want, people who have things to say. Like one of the interesting things about the people so far who have showed up and been interested in this is that, it's usually people's pet projects. They're like, one of the authors who I won't reveal yet, who we've been talking to, she's been talking about how, this is material that she's been sitting on for a long period of time. And she didn't know anyone was interested in it, so she already has for herself a deeply personally invested interest in bringing this material out there. That's the kind of impetus we're looking for, people who are passionate about the subjects that they're looking at, and we want to help bring those things to light, basically. So I would say if you're going to send us some information, make sure you have, a pretty good description of what you're trying to do and why you want to do it. Why is it important to bring that message out for the people to see, and why is it something that we need to see out there? It would be important.
So, of course, we have email addresses and everything, but please be also a bit patient if you don't get replies right away, if you have questions, or if you want to have remarks for this show, for this podcast, or for the Pansophers.com 2.0 or whatever. It's building up, it's coming together, and we are ready to launch. But as with every launch into space, maybe there are 3 or 4 trials before really the takeoff will happen, but we are at it. So, well, gentlemen, thank you for that. I think we made a good preview on the new steps that we're going to take, and I thank you very much for being here today. It will certainly not be the last time that we meet. And, well, good luck in all our projects, I may say. And, well, I think we should all 4 say goodbye now to our listeners. So, Sam, you start.
Yeah, thanks for listening in, and especially to you, Rudolf. Thank you for kicking off the Pansophers Podcast.
Of course. Ryan.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has turned out even better than I expected. I think that we really have a good synergy amongst us 4, and just really excited to see where this goes from here. So thank you all.
Thank you, and Ike.
Well, I was hoping that we would say goodbye like in a barbershop quartet harmony.
I tried that before.
Try that next time,
but it's not hard.
No,
Next time, yes,
it's
next time.
It really, honestly, is an absolute privilege to be here with the 3 of you and with everyone else that has contributed to Pansophers and will contribute to Pansophers. The 3 of you are gentlemen that I've been following your work since years before I met you. So thank you for having me, and thanks for everybody that listened to this.
Absolutely. Thanks to our listeners. And as you just mentioned very correctly, like, thanks to all of those who have contributed and will continue to contribute to Pansophers and who were not present here tonight at this meeting. Okay, thank you. And, well, it's the 2nd and the 4th Sunday of each month. And South Hermes is in between on the 3rd, just to mention that as well. Okay, thank you, and have a good rest of the day. Okay, that was long after, not so long after the interview, actually. No, seriously. I think we had a great time, and I hope you had a great time as well in listening to this show. It's really a great project, and once again, I'm very happy and proud to be part of that and to be able to provide to Pansophers in the future these 2 podcast episodes per month. But for you listeners, you just continue to find again Rudolf, his podcast, my guests, my friends from Pansophers on top. It's all great, isn't it? So, we'll meet again on Pansophers on October 13. Those of you who are on Thoth Hermes will meet also again on the 20th with another episode on science and occultism. And for the time being, as usual, I'll say, take care, stay tuned, hear you soon.